Nature, I am your master. My dear listeners of Radio Udaan, I am your RJ Babuji, Janak, Rajan, welcoming you to the latest episode of the Great Indian Monologue. Of late, I have been hearing this statement again and again and again. Nature, I am your master. The I mean here is we, the human beings. We have been doing so many experiments in the recent times, trying to control natural elements around us, and it looks like we are a very poor student, humanity as a student when it comes to learning the history of our world. We are doing, genetically modified food and then gene editing and this and that, all thinking that we can change the natural order. But nature has been telling us that is a road, which will not lead you anywhere. It is not even a road, and we simply seem to have become deaf, to the voice of nature. In Australia, it's a classic case. Australia is an island nation. You call it continent or whatever. Before Brits discovered Australia, it was a very peaceful place with a lot of local people. They are now called aborigines, and as of today they are fighting for their legal rights to be represented in their own land. I mean, that's a different story about geopolitics and naval dominance and so on. But what happened is, when Australia was discovered and the empire of the Queen from Great Britain, when they started deporting prisoners into Australia, because it was a very vast land with only animals and sparsely populated with people, they thought it was ideal, open prison kind of thing. But then later on, administrative people and commerce and everything followed, and it soon became a huge thriving colony of the British Empire. So, after you settle down in a particular place, you think the most natural thing to do next is to bring your pets from your homeland into this alien land. So Brits or the British Empire experimented with Australia with many animals, starting from rabbits and so on. But I'm going to focus on a particular animal. It's a horse breed. It's called Brahmby, B-R-A-M-B-I. Brahmby, in American terms, it is called Mustang. It's basically wild horses, untamed horses, which grow wild in nature. And the origin of this, Australia didn't have horse as a species in its soil. So in the late 1700s, some British royal or some British big administrator, he decides to ship a bunch of top-notch, the top kind of breed horses into Australia, thinking that the breed will grow, multiply, and they can bring them back and do commerce with them or whatever. So they start an experiment and they start sending horses by ship. The ship journey from England to Australia those days was really treacherous. It took a very long time. It's about 3 months. And by the time the ship landed, most of the horses they sent on board, they died because of exhaustion, because of climate change or whatever you call it, because of lack of adaptability. They kept repeating the experiment with different kind of breeds, and at last, after a very lengthy try, some horses they survived the arduous journey, and they landed in Australian soil. And some of them died and very few survived, and those few survived, they became really sturdy because they were able to adapt to the local climatic conditions, and that was the reason they were able to survive. The happy Brit settlers in Australia, they started rearing these horses for their work, for their ranches, for their farm related activities and so on, and the numbers slowly started going up. At some point in time, what happened was, if a horse is no longer useful to them, or if a horse escapes its confinement, they go into the forest areas around, the bush areas around, Australian bushes, and it is very difficult to trace them. So like this, slowly the number of horses which went out of domestication, it started increasing. And these horses, they started multiplying in the wild because a lot of food and a lot of space and lack of predators, which meant a thriving population. Slowly the numbers started climbing up, and slowly people started noticing these horses everywhere. So wherever they went, they saw Brahmins. They were initially happy that, the place is wild and thriving with wildlife, and horses are beautiful, and these Brahmins or Mustangs, they are amazingly beautiful. Many of the Red Indian stories and even the comics, if you know, they portray them as the ones used by the Red Indians, right? And even by the American soldiers during the Civil War in America, the war between American settlers and the natives, right? And these horses, they became quite popular, and then soon the farmers realized that these horses were becoming a menace too, a threat too, in the sense they started riding their crops. Because the farmlands were really huge, hectares and hectares of land formed, and all of a sudden you would see a bunch of horses roaming around and eating stuff and destroying your crops. So they start complaining to the government. They try some mitigation measures, but fencing was beyond economic sense because the land was really huge. So they started petitioning the government that we have a threat of this Brahmins. They are running over our farms, they are riding our crops, and we are at a big loss. Please do something. The government tried various initiatives, and at some point in time, believe me, my friends, it deployed a bunch of military snipers. Snipers? Sharpshooters? Are you joking? No, this is history. So, a battalion of snipers were deployed to hunt and kill these Brahmins. So, as a pilot, they identified a particular area where the farmers kept reporting large sightings of Brahmins, and they pitched their tent there, and they ordered some jeeps with mounted machine guns on them, and they started their job of tracking and hunting down all these horses. The campaign started, not much success in the initial days, and then in one fine day they were able to kill about 50 horses. And what happened next was really amazing, and till this day it had been a folklore miracle kind of, and it has been widely recorded and ridiculed in history by those writers of those time. What happened was, once the snipers were able to kill a bunch of horses, the pack, horses normally roam around in a pack in the wilderness, like some 25 horses, 50 horses or whatever, or even bigger numbers. So once they sensed a threat through the snipers' activities, they split the group, and they started moving wider and wider and wider, thereby drawing the snipers deeper and deeper and farther into the land. The campaign went on for a month, and at some point in time the military realized that it is futile. We are not going to win this war because the enemy is very smart, and it is actually displaying advanced military warfare tactics which even the modern world hasn't mastered. So what happened was, the bullet count to the horse count, the number of bullets fired and the number of horses killed. I will give you an example. 3,000 bullets fired, 30 horses killed. Even if you take 300 horses killed, it's a sham on the military skill, right? You're a sharpshooter, you spent 3,000 bullets, you killed only 300 horses. Are you joking? So they became the ridicule of the nation in a very short while. And after dilly-dallying for a few more weeks, because it's a honor thing for the military, so the government tried to support that by sending more supplies and more refurbishments, but it didn't work. And meanwhile, the horses, they kept moving around and they kept destroying more in farther and farther regions. So it became a huge debating point in their parliament, in the Senate or parliament, whatever they call it in the country, and the government ultimately dropped the plan. But then what happened is, the problem continued, the farmers kept complaining, and time and again, the government would, try to do this. But having learned from its mistakes, what it did after that was announcing or declaring a bounty that, if you bring in so many dead horses, we compensate by money. This is like rewarding a kill. It was a hugely successful campaign because, when you say that anybody can kill these horses if they sight them, people started hunting enthusiastically, and soon the numbers were brought into control. But only for a very brief time, because the wilderness in Australia is really so vast a stretch. The horses, they found newer and newer interior places, deeper places into bushes. They continued multiplying and thriving. And to this date, the very few horses which landed in the shores of Australia have been multiplying all along, and now they are running into lakhs. Now nobody knows the exact count, and the government stopped hunting activities because of animal rights activism, which has perked up in the last few decades. And these Brahmi horses, they have cult following, not just in Australia but worldwide, because obviously when you are a beaten up guy, a lot of support will come your way, because people like supporting the fallen heroes. And the same happened to Brahmis also. So hobby clubs, horse riding clubs, they all popped up, and Brahmis have become a part of the cultural identity. So killing them is not an option anymore. But Australia is still scratching its heads, regarding how to handle those Brahmis. This is a classic example of man trying to tame nature, thinking that I am God maker. Literally, I make gods, I create all kind of gods that we pray today. So I can do anything with nature. I can add this species there, I can remove this species here. But it doesn't work like this. This classic example, it played out over a period of 250 years. But we humans, we think that we can change nature within our lifetime, because we think within our lifetime, right? I mean, we can think only as long as we live, and these kind of the ideators and the scientists and the implementers, they think they can change nature within their lifetime by doing something drastically different, either removing a species or adding a species or whatever it is. But it doesn't work, because if you are not able to understand something within our lifetime, how can we ever change it? This is very basic principle, right? If you understand 100% of something, then you can try and change something with a better idea that if you do this, then things will be better. But if you don't even understand what is happening, then how can we change? And science has been erring on this basic foundational principle again and again and again. And we are, reaping the wrath of nature in multiple ways. I will give you another example closer to home. In the 1960s, when we had a huge, famine, drought stretch, which meant our, staples, our, food supplies were plummeting, and we didn't have any stock left with. So we had to brainstorm with, Western countries, and America at that point in time had an agenda to push, lab-modified wheat, the high-yielding wheats, the so-called high-yielding wheats, into Asian continent, and India became the ideal, test case. And what happened was, when we imported wheat seeds from Mexico, by the American initiative funded by Ford Foundation and American government, some Parthenium seeds, Parthenium is a weed. It's an invasive plant. It thrives in any kind of climatic condition, and it grows very fast, and it flowers very fast, and has copious seeds, and the seeds, they spread and multiply in no time. So they invade, they actually take over whatever area the seeds fall. So growing any crops around them is literally impossible. These Parthenium seeds, they took a free ride along with the wheat seeds all the way from Mexico to India. And once it reached India, it landed in Punjab, and then the wheat seeds were distributed all along the country, wherever we had agrarian lands. The Parthenium also traveled. In the next 50-60 years, Parthenium has spread so widely. I'm coming from the state, Tamil Nadu, where in some places it has been given a local name, like, It's a Coimbatore garlic or something like that. It's identified with the local land, making people think that it is a native invasive weed. But the origin is in Mexico, and the government had tried so many measures to eradicate this Parthenium, to remove it from our landscape, unsuccessfully till today. Because if I step out from my home, I see Parthenium everywhere, on the curb of the road, in my field, in literally any place where we still have some soil left with. And of late, they have through their agriculture institutes in India, they have brought a particular bug from Mexico which feeds on Parthenium. Like, this is a predatory species for Parthenium. So the idea is they will give farmers these bugs, and if we farmers free these bugs in our fields, they will destroy the Parthenium crops. But nobody knows what this introduction of the bug, the Parthenium eating bug, would mean to other species around us and the ecosystem we live in. Why it becomes important? Remember Brahmi? One horse. It changed the way a country thinks forever, and it is still a perennial problem for them. But in Indian context, I would narrate a very, very interesting story which our science tried and failed miserably. It was narrated by a tree breeding scientist in one of the meetings I attended in the institute in Coimbatore, where he went on to explain how India tried to tame the red borer disease which attacked our sugarcane crop in the 1970s. Sugarcane, a cash crop, which was introduced on a commercial scale around the Green Revolution time. It was actually very widely cultivated, and at some point in time, the stem borers, they started affecting the stems of the sugar canes. They leave a classic mark too. If you cut open a sugar cane and if you see some kind of a red streak in the middle, it's a classic case of a stem borer having attacked the sugar cane and having sucked away the vital nutrients from the sugar cane. So the government and the scientists, they broke their heads, and they did so many research, and they finally narrowed it down to a couple of parasites which were unleashed on the red borers in foreign countries, particularly in Japan, and they were hugely successful in controlling the red borer attacks in the sugarcane cultivation in Japan and in some other Asian countries also. Right? Those two parasites, they were brought into India, and they were given to farmers. The name of them, one is Trichogramma japonicus and the second one is Trichogramma chilonis. They are like a pair, a male and female. For example, parasites which live along with other plants, and they eat them, plants or insects or whatever, right? And they actually let loose these parasites on our native sugarcane borers, thinking that they have found a means to conquer the pest and, in a way, nature itself. But little did they know that nature had a huge surprise for them in store. These two creatures actually fell in love, not only within themselves but also with the alien climate of India, and they started breeding some unknown species rapidly and totally forgot our sugarcane borer. They totally forgot the job of killing the sugarcane borers. Our scientists had no clue as to what to do. They scratched their heads in absolute confusion for a while and then came up with an innovative and apt, not solution, but a name for the new species. Science needs to identify everything with a name, right? It needs to tag everything, right? So, Trichogramma confusum was thus born in the fields of India as an unexpected gift to science. No, I'm not kidding. Trichogramma is a generic name of the parasite and was named confusum. This new species was named confusum because the scientists are actually confused of its whereabouts and what it can do and so on, right? And don't Google that. You won't find anything because scientific mistakes like these are never published unless an insider blows a whistle. Sadly, this incident happened before the whistleblower culture was born. The sugarcane borers are still happily riding the crops, confuse them or not, and our scientists ended up with more problems to handle than what they began with. Another quote from the same scientists, it kind of shook up the audience, even the sleepy ones, and nailed a great message. He said, in your quest to make quick profits, you expect an attempt to speed up the growth of slow-growing trees, say a teak tree or mango tree or whatever, by various means against natural order. You pump in chemicals, you try so many experiments to increase the growth or to increase the yield or whatever. I ask you this question. Then I ask this question. Try answering it with unwavering conscience. How many of you would want your girl child to reach puberty faster? Say at the age of 7 or 8 years instead of 20. Sadly, this question is not hypothetical anymore. This is actually happening in developed countries. Girl children attending puberty by the time they become 8 or 9. Hardly a child. They already, become adolescent girls because of early onset of puberty. And though the causes are unintended consequences of the lifestyle, chemicals used in food, junk food, then genetically modified food, easy access through media to information not appropriate for the age, and so on and so on and so on. Somewhere in the evolution of our humankind, we forgot the basics, that we are all star particles, we are all stardust, and if we call them God particles, we are all God particles. But these God particles, trying to create a new God particle or trying to speed up a God particle, we have to face our own music all the time, alright? And it looks like our unending quest in the name of modern science will not allow us to rest easily, and we will keep on tinkering with nature, and nature will keep on teaching lessons. Only we are either slow learners or we seem to have become dumb to real facts, and we still continue pursuing our holy grail of whatever, immortality or conquering the nature and controlling anything and everything around us as a singular species. This doesn't work. So my dear friends of Radio Udaan, I'm your RJ Babuji Janak Rajan. I hope I have enthralled you with yet another interesting way of life story of who we are and what we are and how we are, becoming better or worse, you decide. And thanks for listening. I'll speak to you in a week with yet another beautiful episode in the Great Indian Monologue. Till then, my dear friends, stay blessed, stay happy, stay healthy, at peace. Bye-bye.